All right, good to talk to you guys again. Today's presentation, as mentioned, I'm going to focus in on some of the potato results, give you a little bit more information there. Just as far as a quick outline, just outline a little bit of weed control challenges that you may be running across in potatoes. Maybe give you a bit of a suggestion on why weed control is not at where we're expecting it sometimes. Then I'll step in and evaluate some of my trial results I had from some work a couple years ago, evaluating some of the new herbicides, and I'll get into some of those registrations that have happened recently. And then end the talk on some of the problem weeds that I was asked to give some recommendations on, or some of my thoughts on as well. Basically, we all know that we need to worry about our weed control. They do compete with those limited resources for light, water, nutrients, and space. They can act as hosts for other pests. Nightshades and light blights, the kind of poster child for that, but it also can help other diseases and other insects as well too. And then you have your quality and harvest issues as well too. So there are some significant issues that if you're not watching your weed control, you do pay for it in the pocketbook. One of the, I guess the most common question I receive on weed control in potatoes is usually our later season weeds. Tend to get the call in August, September. Why do I have lamb's quarters or pigweed on the edge of the field, or these certain spots within the field? Why are these weeds showing up here at the end of the season? It was clean all the way up, and then after, as soon as we got some heat, it was starting to show up. So there's lots of reasons that those weeds could be showing up. We always tend to point to resistance as the first one, but there's lots of other reasons that can be there, and I'll outline some of those here today for you. The first one is basically on our growing conditions. I'll use the example of 2012 season that we had in New Brunswick, at least anyway. We had good moisture early on, got dry in the middle of the summer, and then a little wetter at the end of the season. But you can see from the picture there, the potato canopy that year never closed in a lot of fields. So, we had that extra light that was going to the ground, and you were encouraging some of those late season weed escapes to come through there if you've got that thinner potato canopy. The ones that usually take advantage of that extra space, pigweed and lamb's quarters, are the ones that you most commonly see, but volunteer canola is the other one that we have to start to pay a bit more attention to as well. I think that's another one that could be showing up as one of those later season weeds. We can also run into some issues with our herbicide applications as well. We tend to go to the end of the lower end of those registered rates, and even lower than that sometimes, and that can compromise the weed control that we're expecting. If we're going in there with a lower rate, you may not be getting that full season weed control. If you're putting on that low rate, it may not be able to stretch, keep you clean all the way through harvest. One thing to keep in mind, though, is your crop rotation. As you get to the higher end of those product rates, you got to watch with your rotational crops sometimes. The other issue that can come into play is our timings. We got to pay attention to those labels on your weed stages. If your weeds are getting too large to control, you should be expecting a little bit less control. The one I always bring up is metribuzin. I like to see metribuzin being applied as a pre-emerge product in potatoes. We tend to push it post-emerge a lot of the time, and I think that's a lot where some of our issues on weed control are coming from, is that we're just putting the product on when it's maybe not as effective as it could be. The other issue when you're dealing with your soil applied products is your moisture. You do need a little bit of rain to get those products in there. It's usually that 3 to 5 centimeters within 10 days of spray, but it can depend on your product. But if you don't get that rain, that's where you can see your product performance go down a little bit. A kind of related issue is soil crusting as well too. Sometimes if your soil hasn't settled after you've done a hilling operation, you're putting on your pre, you might be, the soil may shift a little bit, and you may not get that full barrier for weed control. And then your obvious sprayer issues that you'd really need to make sure that your sprayer is calibrated correctly, all your nozzles putting out the product correctly, and making sure you're applying it where it's supposed to be going. The other kind of elephant in the room, I guess, is our switch to the one-pass hilling system. I think there's lots of benefits, and we heard some of the previous speakers talk about the one-pass hilling, and it does give us a lot of benefits. But one thing it does remove some of those later season cultivation passes or hilling passes that we used to have. So we're going from a 2 or 3 pass cultivation to a 1 pass cultivation. So I think we're getting a little bit more weed control benefit out of those later hilling passes than what we were giving it credit for. And we really haven't changed our herbicide practices for this one-pass hilling system. I think we've stayed with lower end the rates that may have been all right when we went through with the cultivator a couple extra times, but now that we're just going through that one time, maybe we need to look at our herbicides again and do a little bit of, we should do a little bit of testing at with some of our herbicide rates just to make sure that we're still using the appropriate rate within the one-pass healing system. So it's just something to think about if you are moving to that system and you're still using your old herbicide rates, that maybe you need to rethink that a little bit. There are some other factors that could be coming into play there as well too. The weed control in our rotational crops, we talked about a little bit there yesterday, but sometimes we forget about the weed control in our non-potato years, and I'll pick on our cereal crops there, that sometimes we get a little complacent with our MCPA applications, put them on a little late, and we're really not helping our weed issue if we're doing those kinds of things. Anything we can do to limit that seed bank and help improve control of some of those perennials that we can have a harder time with, it will help in those rotational years. And then the other one that that we usually point the finger to first, but it is weed resistance. That the main herbicides that we are using in potatoes are prone to resistance development. So we really need to be cognizant of that. Make sure we're doing a good herbicide rotation and watching out if we do have resistance issues. Make sure that we're dealing with them with the appropriate tools. So basically, when you're taking these lessons and trying to apply them back to your fields, the specific reason why you're getting a weed showing up in your field could be a lot of different reasons and a lot of different factors. But really, you have to look at your control program and see why that weed's slipping through there. And then maybe if you're consistently seeing the same weeds coming through or the same issues popping up, maybe you need to consider changing your weed control strategy within those fields. The big key in that is your record keeping and scouting. You really need to know what you're trying to measure and keep track of things to make sure that you're able to deal with it in the future. And then, I mentioned that it's usually the calls in August that you get, as the weed specialist from the potato guys in New Brunswick at least, that's when I get some of the calls. But really, reacting to those weeds in August, you're too late. But make sure you learn the lesson for the next time you go through that rotation. All right, so switching gears here, I'll talk a little bit about some of the research I did in 2012. Basically, I was working with a cooperator who had a very significant issue with marsh hedge null, and I'll get into that a little bit later on. And I also wanted to take a look at some of the newer herbicides within our one-pass hilling system. For those of you who have not seen this beast before, it's marsh hedge nettle. It's a perennial broadleaf plant with significant rhizome system. You can see the big fat finger-like rhizomes, and that's basically where it's getting its energy from to survive and make it through there. The issue with this weed within the potato rotation, at least anyway, it really takes advantage of that senescence of the potato canopy later on in the season, and it's ready to sit there and jump and take advantage of that light and when it does come available later in the season. It's very hard to control one, and really we didn't have any strong recommendations for control options in potatoes, and that's basically why we had to look at the trial here. Trial location, we put it on Russet Narcota planting, one-pass hilled on June 3rd back in 2012. We looked at 3 different application timings. Your pre-emergent was for most of them. I did have the ground crack, one ground crack treatment in there, and then some post-emerge treatments as well too. And then the grower took care of everything else for me, which was nice. As far as the treatments that we looked at in the trial, the untreated with the Sencor and the Linuron, both of those products were applied at the low end of the registered rates. I had a look at a new product called Outlook, and I'll get into the details on that one a little bit later. But basically, looking at it as a standalone and then as a tank mix with Sencor. Also looked at a couple new Group 14 products, Flumioxazin and Reflex. They're more broadleaf products. The Outlook's more of a grass type product. And then looking at some layering of some of those treatments with Prism. We had thought that Prism may have some activity on the hedge nettle, and layering it over top of some of those pre-emerge treatments might help us increase the control. And then we also had Sencor ground crack in there as well too. So basically, as far as the results go, crop safety wise, we're good with pretty much all the treatments. A little bit of injury from that ground crack treatment with the Sencor, but everything else seemed to be fine. The one caveat on this trial, though, as you'll see from the pictures later on here, we had an extremely high Marsh-Edgenel population. You know, as a weed guy, when you're doing trial work, you do like to have that high weed pressure, but that may skew some of the results here a little bit. All the pre-emergent herbicides that we put out there in the trial slowed down the Marsh-Edgenel slightly. You could see the effects compared to the untreated controls, but if you had to pick one, Outlook was the one that was looking the best there. And then adding Prism on top of any of those pre-emerged products helped improve the Marsh-Edgenel control. There were some other broadleaf weeds present within the plot areas, but very low population, so take the recommendation here with a bit of a grain of salt. We had excellent weed control from all those pre-emergent products. They all did a good job, but it was starting to break down there by harvest time. The Prism application helped stretch that control a little bit, so that's something to think about if you're having some later season weeds present, that maybe sneaking that Prism application in there may help you. We also had a very low population of grasses, and basically Outlook controlled the grasses. Sancor and the Linuron suppressed them. The Group 14s had a limited effect, which was expected. And then adding Prism in there helped the grass control that we saw. So this is what the plots were looking like at harvest. And you can see, you know, that's a pretty nice mat of Marsh-Edgenel. We had a pretty good population there at the end of the season. So you can see Sancor by itself really not carrying the load with the perennial weed, and which was expected. We didn't think we were going to get much control. As you're layering in that Prism, though, we were improving control, and then going with the Outlook did improve control as well. You know, in hindsight, it would have been great to have that Outlook with Prism, but it wasn't something we included in the trial. So I wasn't expecting Outlook to look as good as what it did on the Marsh-Edgenel, so that was a bit of a surprise at the trial. As far as yield-wise, we did harvest some of the plots there. No treatment effects on total yields, but we did get a little bit of marketable yield, most likely due to that high Hedgenel population, though. As you can see, there's a lot of Hedgenel competition there. Untreated was the lowest, and we really didn't pick anything else out on yields, and no effects on specific gravity either. So as far as the recommendations that are coming out of that one, for Marsh-Edgenel control, Outlook pre-emergence is something to think about. Post-emergence Prism would be the other one to try to drop in the program. And then keep in mind your non-potato year. Clean your cultivator, make sure you're not dragging those rhizomes from field to field. And if you are dealing with Marsh-Edgenel locally, just see me later on. I also ran some trials in some grain crops as well too, so I can give you a recommendation on that as well. As far as the one-pass hilling system, I think we really need to take a harder look at some of those herbicide treatments within that system and look at some different rates of some products and see, just to verify that our rate structures are all right and make sure that we're doing the right things within that rotation. The new products that I evaluated there, they're not going to be a standalone one-shot deal. I think they're going to be a supplement to our existing program, but it's just how to layer those products together to get us some adequate weed control. And then the other thing to mention there, I was using the low end of the Sancor and Lorax rates, so maybe if I was increasing the rates, I might see a little bit better control or season-long control out of those products as well. So as a bit of a product update, Helena mentioned it earlier with the Tricor. It's a generic version of the Metribuzin that was available last year. I did run a trial with it and saw no differences between it and Sancor. At the same application rates, they're performing the same within my trial work. The other new one that you may be seeing is Outlook, dimethanate P. It's the same active as a Frontier that you would be seeing in corn and soybeans, but for the potato market, it's going to be Outlook that you'll be applying. It's a Group 15 herbicide, so the same family as what Dual would be. Pre-emergent application. Your rate structure depends a little bit on your soil type and organic matter. Keep in mind that if you're looking down to the U.S. for some information on Outlook, their rate is a little bit higher there, so you may not be able to take that information straight across, so just to pay attention to that. Basically a grass herbicide with some broadleaf control there as well, as I showed in the Hedgenel trial there. So to wrap things up here, I'm just going to highlight a few of the larger weed issues and give you some thoughts or some ideas on what I'd say for control recommendations. It's going to sound a little bit like a broken record there sometimes, I guess, by the end of it, because we're really kind of limited on the herbicide options that we have, but just some things for you to think about. You know, red root pigweed or lamb's quarters are basically the two largest weed issues that we see in potato production. You know, basically, if you get your timings right with metribuzin or linearon, you should be getting good control, but there is that resistance issue that can come into play. If you are having some issues with these weeds, dropping in something there as your pre-emerge product, either Dual or Outlook, may be able to help you, or else coming back with Prism as a post-emerge may help you as well too. If you got pigweed issues, that would probably be better than what you get from lamb's quarters control. As far as wild buckwheat, the message is fairly similar, but make sure that you've got smaller plants. If your plant stage is getting a little bit larger, you're going to have a harder time to control them. Layering Prism over top of some other treatments may help you out as well too. As far as cleavers, I'm starting to see this a lot more in some of the New Brunswick fields I'm walking around, especially seeing it in potato fields too, which I wasn't really expecting. You see it the odd time in canola and sometimes in your grain, but I've seen a couple potato fields that had some significant cleavers issues. Really, it's the same situation that we saw with the hedge nettle there. I think we've got some tools in the toolbox that may work, but we really haven't tested them yet, and that's something that I'm going to circle and try to do for next year, is do some cleavers work. If you're looking at your cereal control, you do have some options there, but make sure you read the labels and make sure you're getting your products on at the right timings with those ones. Cleavers, they can get pretty large pretty quickly, so make sure that you're getting your treatments on as early as you can. As far as your brassica weeds, you know, your typical potato herbicide should be doing a good job on those ones, but like I mentioned about the volunteer canola, that your control may be wearing off by the end of the season, so that may be a concern. Coming back with Prism may be able to help you as well too. As far as your quackgrass issues go, any of your pre-emerge products, you're basically not going to get much control at all from those products for quackgrass control. You know, if you've got some early growth on your quackgrass, you can get some glyphosate on there to help you with your control, but basically I'd say leave your glyphosate for the fall applications and get it down in the rhizome and get better control there. If you're running into the quackgrass in your potatoes, I'd say your Group 1 post-emerge products are your best bet. You know, I've got a few of them listed there. I'd say Prism would be that kind of next tier down. If I had to pick one for better control, I'd say go with your Group 1s, but with those Group 1s, you're only going to get grass control out of those products, so that's something to keep in mind there. For sow thistle, we do have a couple different species there. It's usually perennial sow thistle is the one that causes the biggest issues, but there are some annual types as well. And really, it's with the perennial type there, it's the rhizomes that's really making your control difficult there. The glyphosate application early on, if you got them out of the ground, is really basically all you can do in potatoes. Any of the other treatments really aren't that effective. So in that case, really focus in on your grain years to try to get control of sow thistle if you got an issue there. And that pre-harvest glyphosate's one that I think that we should be taking advantage of a little bit more for a lot of our perennial weeds. That we've got a control window there for those perennial weeds where we can help improve the control that we need to try to take advantage of if we can. Goldenrods we are also seeing coming to our fields a little bit, and I assume it's the same thing over here. Usually it's the narrow leaf goldenrod, but there are a couple other species. A lot of the time it's those fields that are coming out of sod, but I have seen it in some more established kind of potato fields as well too. But basically Prism's the one in the potato rotation that would be the one that I'd be going to. And then if you're growing grain, the Phenoxys is probably your best bet there. Last one, I believe it's the last one I have here anyway, is mugwort. And basically in New Brunswick we have patches of mugwort. It's a lot like the hedge nettle, that we've got certain areas that it can be an issue, but it's really not widespread yet. But it's another one that's very difficult to control, really nothing strong to recommend. If you got in your grain, dicamba, if you don't have potatoes in there, but Montreal is probably your best bet, but you're going to have to stay with potatoes for a little while if you're going with Montreal. The last thing I'll mention is our Government New Brunswick website, gnb.ca/agriculture. If you go and go to the potato section, I do have an updated weed control guide in potato. and do have the weed control ratings there, and also do link into our IPM site there as well too to help you with the weed identification as well too. So just a resource there if you're looking for a little bit more information later on. As I mentioned earlier, feel free to give me a call or fire me an email if you got any questions, and I'll probably be around here for a little while at least anyway if you've got questions. So, yep.
I was just wondering if you had any care to make any comments on why Brunswick doesn't appear to be under the wire workers.
Yeah, I don't know if I've got the magic answer there for you. I think we're probably just lucky. Would be the only thing that I'd be saying. Like we do run across certain fields and certain rotations do have some issues with wireworm, but I don't think that we're anywhere near the level that you guys are experiencing there. I think we're just lucky that we don't have the invasive species there, or the one type, as it's not as prevalent. Knock on wood, I guess, right? I think we're just knocking, I think most of the ones that we're seeing in the field there were coming from rhizomes, and I think we're just setting those rhizomes, those plants back a little bit. When I was applying the pre-emerged products even, I was 4 or 5 days after hilling, we were still seeing some hedge nettle popping out already. So I'm assuming the bulk of it's coming from rhizome as it gets in the field. I think it's moving a little bit on our grass waterways by seed, though. I think the seed will float, and that's how it gets into a new area, sets the rhizomes, and then pops on your tillage equipment to move around the field. But I think we were getting a little bit of control on the perennial stuff, but it wasn't great. It was slowing it down, but not complete.
So glyphosate would be the thing to, like if you're using that for top kill?
Well, you wouldn't be using your glyphosate for top kill, but I did... Yeah.
Systemic killing the rhizome?
That's it. Like if you were able to get some, I did, for 2013 work, I did do some screening work there. Actually, I wasn't as impressed with the glyphosate that I put on in the spring, but I think if you're hitting that pre-harvest fall timing, you may be able to get it down in the rhizome and get a little bit better control. But it's, when you're looking at your Roundup Ready crops, that early spring timing, maybe you're not going to get complete control of your perennials with it. So focus on the fall if you can. All right, if there's no other questions, I'll be around for a bit here later too.